there's something called regenerative travel. And
Okay.
There's transformational travel, and I like to say regenerative tourism.
Okay.
That's our goal, is to move to something regenerative, where sustainable tourism, people have heard a lot, and that's sort of like do no harm.
Yeah.
Regenerative is I'm actually going to improve a place from my visit. So it's regenerative is giving back. It's making something grow and thrive. It's a holistic way of looking at travel.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 151 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the PR and marketing manager for Whidbey and Camano Island Tourism. Please welcome Sherrye Wyatt. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 151 of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. And I hope your guys' week is going well. We had some sun, we had some rain, we had everything in between. But I hope you guys are getting out there and enjoying summer. We are now into when this releases, the second week of August, which is crazy. But here we are. So, we're already thinking about getting back to school and all that stuff as we're coming up on that. So, yeah. Anyways, also fun story. Not really story, more just me thinking in my head. I was about to record this episode, and I was like, I want to try a different voice for this, and so I did not. And so you're welcome, but that was in my head, and so I really wanted to try it. If you ever log in at some point, or you go to listen to this, and I have a really weird intro voice, you know what happened. Anyways, also, real quick before I jump into this part, follow me on the Insta, the IG, whatever you guys call it these days, at the Camano Voice. I am really trying to post more, and I'm really failing at that. But here we are, and I want to keep promoting that because I want more people to follow me there. And if you can interact with me, that's even better, because then I don't feel like I'm just talking to a microphone into the middle of nowhere. So, without further ado, I get to speak with Sherrye Wyatt, and Sherrye Wyatt has a very varied, there we go, background. She has done a lot of stuff when it comes to marketing, lots of work in PR. She actually worked with wineries in Washington and really helped with wineries as well as ciders. So ciders, she was kind of working in that field when hard cider became really a big thing, kind of made it big time. So fascinating background in all of these different industries. And now, and for the last quite a few years now, her focus has been on tourism for Whidbey and Camano Islands. So she's put a lot of work and energy into that. So if you live on Camano, you've probably heard the name Sherrye Wyatt. You've probably seen her around because she is always promoting these islands. But during COVID, we actually had the reverse issue where we weren't having trouble getting people to the island. We were having trouble keeping people off the island and staying safe and not destroying the trails. So that has caused her to evolve once more and really focus in on this new thing that they're terming as transformational travel. So we're going to get into all of that and more, and kind of the evolution of how tourism and all that has happened here on Camano and Whidbey. And what we see as the future of tourism, so that for generations to come, we have a beautiful island for them to enjoy. I'm really excited for this episode. Sherry's just great. She's been a friend of the family for quite a while, and we've known her, seeing her around. So anyways, excited to introduce you to her on the podcast. If you haven't met her, without further ado, here's my conversation with Sherrye Wyatt. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with the PR and marketing manager for Whidbey and Camano Islands Tourism. Welcome to the podcast, Sherrye Wyatt.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Sherrye.
Well, I'm originally from Eastern Washington.
Okay.
I grew up on a farm, and my brother and I still own the farm. It's
Really?
about 30 miles north of the Tri-Cities.
Okay.
And I went to school at a small little country school and then on to Washington State University. So
Okay.
I'm really from Eastern Washington
Yep.
originally.
Nice.
And moved to Freeland on Whidbey Island in 2007, so about 15 years ago.
Okay.
I fell in love with someone who was in love with the island. And we moved over here and just started making our way and really have loved it.
Nice. So, does your brother still live at the farm then?
He does, yeah, and we've leased the property to
Okay.
another neighboring farmer,
Nice.
but he lives there and takes care of the homestead, and we have a little vineyard and a few orchard,
Cool.
a few apple trees and things, so it's still very sweet. It's nice to go visit.
Yeah, very cool. All right. What was it like growing up in Eastern Washington for you?
Well, I think growing up on a farm really gives you a certain work ethic.
Yes.
You're really not able to do all of the after-school activities either.
Yes.
So you have to come home and go back to work, and you get up in the morning and you start working at the farm.
Yeah.
So it teaches you sort of what's important in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to own and ride horses and show horses and grow vegetables and flowers and have them at the county fair and
Nice.
pick fruit and sell it at a little fruit stand. And I think there are lots of really, really treasured memories I have about that.
Yeah.
And I had a large family, so we all grew up together on the farm, and
Okay.
it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah. Did you guys have like a farm, just kind of a bunch of different kind of randomized things? Were you more specialized, and was it just for your family or public?
It was 80 acres, so it's
Oh,
enough
wow.
enough property to actually be commercial farming.
Yeah.
But we rotated the crops, so it was an irrigated row crop is what it's called, and you'd have alfalfa and then maybe wheat and then rotate to corn, and we had an orchard and vineyard, as I mentioned, and so there's plenty of activity and lots
Yeah.
of always something in season and always something to harvest, and yeah, it was a good way to live. And we also had cattle.
Okay.
So when we had other properties as well where we had cattle, and then they would come back to the family farm. You'd bring them, for the winter, and
Okay.
then they'd go back out on the range. So
Nice.
yeah.
Very cool. So, did you go to school? You went to school out there.
Yeah.
As you were going through school, did you ever think you would continue the farm, like taking it over, or what was kind of your thoughts?
That's an interesting question because you want to get away from the farm. Something about, it's all romantic and all that, but then there's a part of you that's like thinking about Manhattan or Chicago, or wouldn't Paris be nice? Or, you start this thing in your mind about, I've got to get as far away as possible. And so I thought that I would leave and become an attorney or a screenplay writer, and, had ideas of what my life might be like.
Yep.
And funny thing is, my first job out of college was back in the hometown, working at a newspaper, living at the farm.
Okay.
And I never regret that.
Yeah.
Because there's a deep appreciation for home and
Yep.
that kind of security and stability that it gives you.
Yeah.
And all the other stuff is still out there, and I did hop around and live in some of those great places, but there's always the farm. You come back to that where home is.
Yeah.
And that sort of keeps you grounded.
Yep. Nice. So, what did you end up going to college for then?
Well, I studied communications.
Okay.
And public relations was my specialty, and I got very involved in the national level in the Public Relations Student Society
Okay.
of America, and I became a district director and was a national officer. So we had meetings in Chicago and New Orleans and New York, and I had a chance to see some of these great urban cities, and was really active in my school, in my college.
Yeah.
I was part of the association student body. I was the PR director for the school, for the student body, and then I was active in a sorority, and I was the standards chairman, and was an officer, and lived in the house, and I was very, Greek Woman of the Year, and
Nice.
all those things. Got really
Yeah.
involved and loved it. I
Yeah.
love to have lots of burners on high, I guess, as my father would have said. She likes all the burners on high, because that's how you cook, right? You
I love that
Keep
description.
things moving, yeah.
That's great.
So,
So, when you finally got to go out and visit these big cities, stuff like that, did they appeal to you, or what did you feel?
Definitely. And I imagined myself, you know, perhaps working at a large PR agency, and had interviewed for a few and didn't hear back. And it was quite shocking because I thought, you know, with all my credentials and, you know, I should be they should be so lucky to have me, is what you're thinking. And realized that, you know, it's really tough out there.
Yeah.
And it was a romantic idea to go and live in Chicago by yourself and try to carve out a living. It wasn't necessary. You know, there was another route for me. And I did end up living in Washington, D.C. and working for 3 years for the North American Export Grain Association. Kind of a lobbying outfit, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
We worked, again, in agriculture, though. So I was working for the grain export companies. The big ones, ADM, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, and learned a lot really fast and loved every minute of it. And it was great to be a part of that, you know, time in the world, and I don't regret that at all, but it wasn't the right place to stay. It felt like you do it for a while and then you come back to Washington State. And I was glad to come back home.
Do you feel being on the kind of that, whether that's the inside or just being exposed to that over and over, do you see kind of everything that's coming over the next couple years when it comes to grain, fertilizer shortages, all that? Do you look at that differently as far as looking at it and kind of already understanding, you know, if you were working with the export, you were seeing it, how that whole thing works? What are your thoughts on kind of how that's going?
Well, you know, it's so much changing all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to being successful, is being resilient and flexible and anticipating what's going to happen next. I worked a lot with the grain traders, you know, in Wall Street, and they were always, you know, the information was the most valuable tool. Any information they could get, even if it was the name of a person who had changed jobs, you know, it was really critical to know every little piece. And I think that's what helps you be successful, is really, you know, staying on top of what's true and what's really happening, and not just continually speculating or what if, or you know, hoeing and humming. You know, really you have to find out what's really going on. And stick to the facts. And that'll help guide you more. I think. Because there's always all sorts of stories swirling around.
Well,
and, you know, we didn't even have social media then. We had a fax machine. So there was, you know, like 3 of us of the photocopier and a fax machine, you know, running, you know, a pretty significant trade association. But we did it with factual and relationships. Relationships were really valuable. You know, and staying in touch with who was in the White House, and, you know, who was the Speaker of the House, and who were the key lobbyists, and you know, just keeping those good relationships. My boss at that time taught me a secret, and when a friend of ours was fired, he said, you always take them to lunch right away, because other people will shun them, but go take them to lunch. You know, you never know what's going to happen, and you had a good relationship, so why would you not continue it just because you think they're of less use now? You know, it doesn't work that way. That person ended up in the White House. So I was like, oh, he's right. You know, just it's about relationships.
It is.
And staying loyal to people, even if maybe they've changed positions or they've, you know, walked away from something.
Very cool. That was always something I did. I've learned and admired about my dad. My dad started with nothing, and then has built a lot in his lifetime. But that was something when he would do these business trips, you know, especially when you do international. The people that you're going to see always want to put that show on for you and kind of show you the best of what they have, and just like, this is my empire, this is what I do. And my dad would always take such interest in the drivers that took us around, or the housekeepers, or he would always, it didn't matter what level you are within that person's company, he would take the time to sit down, talk with you, ask you questions, where are you from? And the times I traveled with him, it was always something that's like, he really doesn't, because he always relates more to them than he does the people that were at the top. Because, like, I started here. Like, this is where I was. And so he always related with them better. And I always enjoyed that, because you hear these really interesting stories and you get to hear their life. And
you know, and some of the best ideas come from real people, you know, really doing the work. And I was in a meeting at a restaurant with a boss of mine, and we had presented this beautiful marketing plan, and we're very excited about it. And he turns to the wait staff and, brings them all over to see what they think. And I was a little surprised. I thought, well, that's kind of thinking outside the box. And it was just fascinating. And I really admired that about him, how he wanted to hear what real people thought, not just what the marketing people think.
Right.
Been, very, very focused on seeing this maybe in a, not in the biggest picture, but in our own way, in our own fears and whatever we thought we needed to do to make him happy.
Yeah.
He wanted to see what people really thought. So
yeah.
I learned a lot from the people I've worked for.
Yeah. Very cool.
And
so,
your father is Jeff, and he's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I'm a great admirer of him.
So then, so you were working with the grain company or with grain export. Where did you go after there?
Yeah, so before the grain exporters, I actually worked for the wheat growers in Washington State.
Okay.
And then headed on to Washington, D.C. So that was in like Ritzville, wheat farming town. Then headed to Washington, D.C. and then came back and worked for a PR agency in Ellensburg.
Okay.
And their largest client was the Washington Apple Commission.
Okay.
So I grew very close with the people at the commission and started to, I loved being in agriculture and in agriculture communications, and we were tackling some difficult challenges. Al-R had just been a 60-minute story that, farmers were using chemicals in the apple industry that might be hurting children, and there was a lot of, publicity about it that was negative publicity for growers.
Yeah.
So we were trying to combat that and come up with some smart strategies. And at the same time, the Department of Agriculture had changed the food pyramid and gave fruit its own category within the food pyramid. You may not even know what a food pyramid is.
No, I remember. I just see. It's funny when I think of the food pyramid. I think of the side of like a wheat thins box. That's always the one I think of.
Right, or a cereal box or something, because grain is such a big one.
Yes.
So it's always on the grain products. But fruit got its own category. So we went to work, and I got to use some of those, Washington, D.C. relationships to create new programs that were really like a school curriculum about apples and about fruit and about growers and farming, and just, tried to create more of a picture of what farming was and not just make it be a negative thing, but more of a positive part of our culture.
Yeah.
And then with that, we created a foundation just for tree fruit. And so to help the farm worker families and to help the warehouse workers' families. It had created scholarships and programs. It's called the Washington Apple Education Foundation.
Okay.
So I did that for 7 years. And the person that I was working with, her name's Vicki Charlo. And she's just a powerhouse and had a lot of vision and brought me through that and helped me, really grow with the apple industry. And the tree fruit industry is a pretty powerful industry, really, in our state.
Yeah.
It's the number one crop that's grown. And,
right.
And it's a pretty big deal. But anyway, we just, apples were really important to me. I grew up with apple orchards.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it fit.
So you ended up actually doing a stint as the executive director of the Northwest Cider Association, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
So did that just kind of slowly evolve from what you were doing?
Not exactly. It was kind of like the perfect marriage of like my whole life was coming into focus. What had happened was Vicki moved on to the wine industry and was working more with the wine grape growers. And many of them were actually at that time taking out their orchards and planting grapes, planting wine grapes, with the vision that maybe that was the next big thing, and they were right.
Yeah.
And so I grew along with her into that industry and worked closely in the wine industry for years with her. And after that, cider at that point was kind of quietly not really fully understood.
Yeah.
There were only 10 people that were actually 10 cider companies that were part of the Northwest Cider Association. and David Bauermeister, who was the executive director of the Northwest Agriculture Business Center in Mount Vernon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's still there, and he and I had gone both to Connell High School. We grew up in the same, part of the state and kind of understood each other really well. And he said, we've got this project. We'd like you to come in and see if you can help grow this organization.
Okay.
So we did immediately, and the timing was perfect.
Yeah.
So Angry Orchard had just really come on the scene. It was about 2012.
Yep.
Is about the year, so 10 years ago. And just ran with that and just exploded. It was the fastest growing actually the fastest growing alcoholic beverage for sure, but it might have even been the fastest growing consumer product.
Okay.
It was actually outpacing the Apple phone. It was like cider was just exploding.
Yeah.
And we were excited to see it grow, and we're active in the Cider Institute of North America now, and helped launch the American Cider Association and these other cider industry pieces. Yeah, so I feel pretty good about that legacy, and excited to see how well cider's doing. Now they have a full-time executive director. And so I was a consultant. See, that's what I do.
Okay.
I float around. I should probably clarify that. I'm a contractor.
Yeah.
So I get to live many lives.
Yeah.
And even with tourism, in the role I play now, I'm a contractor.
Okay.
So we don't have an office. We don't have employees. We use, the best people we can find to do certain tasks.
Yep.
It seems to work well to build a team that way. And even before COVID, we were all working from our own offices from home, and so we were ready.
Yeah.
We were already set up.
Not too much change.
Yeah. Anyway, so cider is a great new, offering, and I love how cider has evolved from just a blend of apples, but there's also single varietal ciders.
Yeah.
There's orchard designated ciders, just like you would see on a wine label with the vineyard name. You'll see an orchard name.
Yeah.
And it's great because it's giving that farmer more visibility.
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea, really, is to tell a farmer's story.
Yeah. Yeah, and the so we're actually looking at doing a cider fest, hopefully coming this fall.
Great.
For Camano, because there's a lot, and in our meeting we were talking about there's a lot of large cider fests going on in the fall. We've got actual cider. What is that one? Cider Fest, Cider Summit. That comes and so anyways we're putting that together through your time as with working with the Northwest Cider Association though. Have you gone to many cider festivals and things like that?
I have gone to many.
Okay.
Been very involved with the summits, and they grew all over Chicago and San Francisco, Portland. I watched Alan with his cider summits, and I've been through a lot of cider fests, and there are some secrets, to making them the most successful, and happy to talk to you more about, give you some ideas, and some things we learned along the way, and how to make sure that it's telling the whole story about cider, including the growing, maybe having growers there with apple trees and fruit itself, so people can see and taste and understand that it's not it's not a red delicious apple that's making that cider. It's almost an inedible bitter. They call them spitters, actually.
Right.
Because you'll take a bite and spit it out. But there's a lot of things you can add to a cider festival that makes it family-oriented.
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
And not just let's all drink a bunch of cider. It can be a whole story.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
So then, how did you end up getting connected with Island County, or not Island County, but Whidbey and Camano Islands Tourism?
Yeah, so I was working mostly as a contractor, again, with the arts community, and kind of came across this position in the paper.
Okay.
In the classified ads, and applied, and it was just the perfect fit for me. Mm-hmm. It was 2010, so I've been at this for 12 years, and we've grown, pretty rapidly into a larger organization. It was just one person at that point. Now we have 5 contractors, and we've been able to kind of delegate pieces of to expertise, to the digital webmaster person, to the graphic design person, to the media relations expert, and to someone who helps with writing and research, and then the role I play. So I think that it's just been a really exciting time to be in tourism. But COVID, we could talk about that. It was really hit the brakes and re-examine tourism at that moment. It was really tough on the travel industry worldwide. Right. One of the biggest industries impacted, but one of the fastest to recover.
Okay.
I think, too.
Good. How did that? I mean, what was that like for you guys? Because you were, I'm sure, connected through many different layers of tourism and travel and stuff. What was that like for you guys?
Well, at first we had no idea what the future looked like, and none of us did. We were worried about our own health and families, and like everyone else, wondering what's next. But we knew we had to stop inviting people to come visit. That the wise and the proper thing to do, the right thing to do was to just tell people to stay home. And when the time is right, to come back.
Yeah.
You know, when it's safe to travel and when we're ready for you again. But we weren't. It was the right thing to do was to stop all that. So all of our messaging moved to kind of a dreaming, escape it all. Lots of video. We repurposed a lot of video to show what it could look like in the future when it's time to come. But don't quit thinking about us. But you know, and it's video can be a very powerful medium. You know, film evokes real strong emotions.
Yeah.
So our campaign actually was written up in the Washington Post because we were so early getting in with this campaign. They were like, wow, this is a destination that realizes we need to tell everybody to stay home right now.
Okay.
And focus on what can be in the future. And then we shifted to encouraging locals to shop local and to support all the local restaurants and the businesses that were suffering so much without visitors. So we dedicated, you know, most of 2020 and 2021 to that.
Yeah.
And stayed in touch. We created a holiday shopping guide. We did a spring guide and a whole campaign, you know, targeting people that live here. Just maybe get around. Maybe if you have never been to Whidbey and you're on Camano, go over and see that side of the county, and vice versa. Encouraging people from Whidbey Island to come over to Camano, and explore their own backyard, basically. So
nice. So then, how was that like as you guys kept going through that? When did you guys kind of turn that corner as far as kind of looking at like, okay, it's time to start getting the word back out there?
Well, it recovered much faster than we expected. So people started coming, and they didn't not come, even when we were saying maybe you shouldn't. There was a lot of reasons for people wanting for mental health reasons, you know, to get out of the city maybe and be in open air and on a beach and in a forest. And so we recognized that people did come, and they stayed mostly in the vacation rentals, the short-term rentals. Yeah. And would bring their whole family and maybe stay for 2 weeks. Yeah. And bring the dog and, you know, work from that site and just be away from those four walls of a small condo. And they were used to going to work every day and suddenly being, you know, trapped in a place that just didn't feel very right. Small. Yeah, mental health, I think people really needed to get out. Yeah. And we have a lot of open space. Yeah. So what we found is people came. And what we found is they kept coming into the visitor centers once they were opened again and asking for trails. And the people in those centers were just sending them to all the same trails. Okay. And so they began to be overloved. And so we listened to what residents said, and they said, please don't keep doing that. Yeah. So we just came out with a new trails guide. Okay. Actually, just this week. Oh, cool. So it's very brand new. It's going to make it out before the 4th of July weekend. Okay. That are 24 trails off the beaten path. Okay. In Whidbey and Camano Islands. And it's a free guide. And it has a lot of stewardship messaging in it, you know, from recreate responsibly and leave no trace. And we worked with a lot of our allied partners, like the Whidbey Camano Land Trust and Soundwater Stewards. Yeah. And we've got the Camano Island Trails folks, and it's just, this is a great collaboration. Yeah. And we think it'll be helpful to, you know, send people out to new trails. Maybe see what you haven't seen before instead of the same, you know, Kama Beach and Deception Pass Bridge and, you know, some of the same iconic, loved places, Double Bluff Beach. You know, they were just getting a little overcrowded. So, we're not the only destination that had to step back and rethink our messaging, and it happened worldwide. Yeah, really, in the tourism industry, people thought, you know, what we've been saying may not be the right message to send, because residents themselves came to us and said, let's rethink tourism. Yeah, you know, let's plan ahead for the future. We don't feel like this is a sustainable model where people just come, and then they just, you know, day trip it, or they don't really understand or appreciate the culture. Right. You know, they just come and they have a checklist. You know, I'm going to see these 3 things. And, you know, and then I'm going to hurry and get crabbing out there, and then I'm going to hurry home. And we're really rethinking tourism as a whole. Yeah. It's a whole new strategic plan for us. Right. Yeah.
So where did that come about? I know you've been working on this transformational travel. Where did that originate from?
That's an interesting story, but we had vloggers. So what you do, right? Yeah. But these were video bloggers who came from the Midwest out to do a story on the islands, and they told me about the Transformational Travel Council that was fairly new. And the Transformational Travel Council is an international organization, but a lot of the leaders are based in Seattle.
Okay.
And the Northwest seems to be really cutting edge, and a lot of key people are right here. So I contacted them and got to know them and found that I actually knew some of them already from a different part of my background.
Okay.
And took one of their courses. It was an ally, it was kind of a deep immersion class of 14 weeks of 4 hours a week of a really intensive self-examination. It was kind of tough because it was really a lot to unpack, and you're really getting into your own beliefs and maybe some of your stereotypes, and really having to work on how I see the world and how I want the world to see us as a destination. So went through that course and said, you know what, I'm going to ask our county if they want to do this too. And went back to our tourism committee and presented the idea, because there are other ways of doing a strategic plan. And there are more traditional ways. You hire a consultant who comes in and you do a few surveys and have a few group meetings and town halls, and then they present you a plan. This isn't like that. And it's slower and it's harder. So I think because it's slower and harder, it will result in a better product. Something that we won't just put in a drawer, and move on to the next strategic plan. This will actually be reinventing tourism, how we see it now. And it's going to take some shifting in understanding what we all value. What are those, what can we agree upon that are the things that we mean the most to us? What are some of the challenges we want to address? And what matters to residents first? So it's really focused on community-based instead of just how can we get them here? Them. We want to take their money. It's not even measured in dollars. Success will be measured differently. It'll be travelers that are coming, that are really guests in our home. And when you're a guest in a home, you do behave differently. So we're going to treat them more like a guest in a home. And there's expectations, too, that maybe they'll help clear the table. It could be there's an opportunity to work on a trail or to help at a cider festival where actually the tourists, visitors themselves will, be involved in something like a cleanup of a beach. Rather than just be the ones who mess up the beach and leave. So it's a new way of thinking, and it'll take some time. I don't think it'll happen by the end of this summer. We really have just gotten started and had to dig into our own selves first.
Well, it is interesting. We, as you look into psychology and stuff, we like to think, at least I do, I don't know if everyone does this, we like to think that we're unique and that we think creatively and that we are our own person. And then when you start doing these psychological tests and you start understanding how the brain works, you realize most people, including myself, are like sheep. And so if a certain few things happen, you fall into that track of mind and you just do that thing. And so like when it comes to tourism and when you're visiting somewhere, you almost have this mindset of like, kind of what you were talking about before, like they're lucky to have me. Like here I am, like I'm visiting your area, I'm going to see what you guys have to offer, and you don't have that same mindset of like, I'm going to have to see, I'm going to see this trail later on. You're like, I'm going to use it once and then I probably won't be back. So you don't think it matters if you do a little bit of damage along the way. Not that you try and purposely do, but just being there.
Well, there's like a moose on the loose is what I call it. When I'm in Leavenworth and I've gotten away from home and I'm just going to be someone else. I'm going to sing in a bar or something, what I never would do. But, that's fine to some degree. That's okay to feel good. And people need to feel good. And I don't want to say that we expect everyone to come here and work now, on your vacation. Sometimes you just need to lay by a pool and just decompress. But it's learning more about maybe who the musicians are that play in that bar, or caring about the cider that's being served that's a local, and asking questions and learning more about the place you're at instead of just what can you do for me. And it actually starts before you take the trip. So you should research where you're going and understand a little bit more about the history, the native tribes, the what was the economy before tourism, or what's going on in this place.
Yeah.
Not just what show is on.
Right.
What can they do for me?
Yeah.
It is. It's a bigger 3-step process. So it's a before, during, and after the trip.
Yeah.
As a visitor, to have a
Okay.
real transformational experience, you have to travel with intention. So it's being intentional. And the Transformational Travel Council has a really nice travel journal
Okay.
that it leads you through this process for yourself. And I'll make sure you get one so you have a chance to see some of the things I'm talking about.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. So with that then, what has that been looking like for you within the Whidbey and Camano Islands tourism?
Yeah. So where does the rubber meet the road kind of thing, right? So we have experienced creators, like kayak companies and such. And, we're talking to them about what questions can maybe they ask people before they, as they're registering for their kayak trip. What are you hoping to learn on your kayak trip? And then following up after, what did you learn and what do you think? And just maybe taking things a little different direction. There's something called regenerative travel.
Okay.
There's transformational travel, and I like to say regenerative tourism.
Okay.
That's our goal, is to move to something regenerative, where sustainable tourism, people have heard a lot, and that's sort of like do no harm.
Yeah.
Regenerative is I'm actually going to improve a place from my visit. So it's regenerative is giving back. It's making something grow and thrive. It's a holistic way of looking at travel.
Yeah.
It's really exciting, and if you've never heard of these terms, you should look them up look around on the internet and read about them. We also have dedicated a whole part of our website that's Whidbey Camano Island, WhidbeyCamanoIslands.com transformational travel.
Okay.
Basically, it would be the / transformational travel. Or you could just go to our website and put in transformational travel in the search.
Okay.
And it'll lead to a whole bunch of articles and stories and case studies and what other destinations are learning. Hawaii in particular. Islands tend to be very vulnerable. And as islands, we have our own set of issues and challenges. So on a global level, we're only the second destination to do this transformational program, by the way, in the world. So officially. So Willamette County in Oregon is the first, and then we're second. So as an island, I think other islands are looking very closely at us.
Yeah.
And we'll be asked to present a case study, at international conferences, and we'll be helping to guide the world in a new direction. I think it's pretty fascinating, and it's a lot of responsibility. So other examples of regenerative is not only volunteering, but I think it's also just that mindset of grace, of caring, of not just being so in a hurry, that rushing through. Right now in Venice, I was just reading a story today about the challenges they're having in Venice, Italy, and the restrictions they may have to put in place to try to just control how people are viewing them.
Yeah.
And jumping in the water and I don't know, just sort of desecrating the place, maybe not even intentionally, or grabbing wildlife and for a selfie, that just not thinking straight because they're the moose on the loose, right?
Yeah.
That's what so we
I love that mindset.
I gotta remind them just to you're in someone's home, and we want you to come back, and we love that you're here.
Yeah.
And we want you to come back. But there are some rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to tell visitors what those are.
Yeah.
And decide for ourselves what those are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think because we had this huge rubber band effect of COVID shutting everything down, I feel like we already had a generation of all of us are kind of this like immediate gratification and that kind of style. But all of a sudden, everything was turned off. Like the faucet was turned off. And now that the faucet got turned back on, even now, like in 2022, I still feel this almost fear of like, well, what if everything disappears again? And so, like, whether it's camping or camping sites or trails or restaurants or anything, I mean, there's the shortages and like computer chips, stuff like that. So, like, you get that when you get the opportunity to get something, it doesn't matter the price. They're throwing themselves at things. So whether that's experiences or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you still have this crazy influx of people just vying for this spot for a campsite or a trail. Are you guys still seeing that, do you feel like?
Well, I've heard it called revenge travel. It's what you remind me of, like when people are hoarding water or toilet paper or something, right?
Yes.
Now they're just like, I've got to get all this travel in, all this
Right.
experience, my revenge travel trip.
Yeah.
We are seeing some of it, but there's only so many places to stay in our islands,
Right.
And that does naturally limit that. And then over on Whidbey Island, we've had a shortage of ferry staff workers. So the ferries themselves have been running a little wonky.
Yeah.
It might be a 3-hour wait when it shouldn't be, or only one ferry all day long instead
Yeah.
of two on a route that people are accustomed to. So that's kind of self-regulating in a way. But I think maybe our messaging is going to help too.
Yeah.
When we explain to people sort of what they might want to see and do here, and maybe a farmer's market, take the time to cook a meal and, to enjoy it with your family on the beach or something, not just use us up, And I think part of the challenge we've found is the worker supply, that shortage of restaurant workers and hotel people to clean rooms and to turn them over faster and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just creating a slower pace and sometimes impatience.
Yeah.
Mostly from locals, though.
Right.
I feel the visitors tend to get it, but not always. It's just a matter of, I think, setting expectations.
Right.
And letting people know, hey, if you're going to arrive late, restaurants might be closed on Camano, and just you need to plan ahead and and
have a plan B.
Have a plan B, yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So then just kind of finalizing that, what are your kind of hopes over the next 5 years for Whidbey and Camano in tourism?
My hope is that we'll be a destination that people who live here appreciate visitors and see tourism as a force for good.
Yeah.
And instead of feeling threatened or angry, frustrated by visitors, they will recognize that they're not just a dollar sign. They're here as part of this global family, and we all live on this planet together, and they're here living here for a while.
Yeah.
Where they are is, this is their life. That's week on this island, and I just think I hope we can communicate in a way that visitors really start to really embrace visitors and not see that as a threat.
Yeah.
Or that we need to, tear Deception Pass Bridge down.
Right.
And close the bridge behind me, because many people actually who moved to these locations on the islands were visitors once. Mm-hmm. Because they say that, tourism is the first date of economic development. It's the beginning. They come a couple times. They want to buy a house here.
Yeah.
They're talking to a realtor. They're moving their family here. And in some cases, I think some people forget that that's how they got here.
Yeah.
They were visitors too.
Right.
And, we just we can all coexist.
Yeah.
And it'll be, I think, a great outcome from this, ultimately. I do believe we will get there. I like that you said 5 years, because there's some impatience with those of us participating in this, hoping, by November, we can have the strategic plan or a destination destination management action plan.
Okay.
Destination marketing is not the word anymore. It's destination management action plan.
Yeah.
A DMAP, they're called. We're hoping to have it done by the end of this year, but I had a conversation yesterday where someone said, what if we don't hit that deadline? is that so bad? Or is that
Right.
maybe smart? You
Yeah.
know, to pull back, slow it down, um, make sure everyone has a voice
Yeah.
at the table. So it may take longer. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's worth the wait.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, especially when you're planning something so far in the future, for a lot of strategic plans are like for a 5-year window.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot can change in a 5-year window.
Sure can.
And so taking a bit of time to just make sure, is this really where we want to see ourselves? Is this really what's important to us?
What do we value?
Yeah.
That's like one of the first questions.
Yeah.
And the answers are wide-ranging. And then some are just always the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I love that when we can get to the common ground. Then we know where to focus our energy.
Yeah.
You know.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid-fire questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
Well, I just purchased a book called Maestro, and it's an interesting story about leading by listening, and it's a compelling and insightful book about how to bring the most out of your team, how a orchestra leader brings all of the musicians to
Yeah.
create a beautiful song. I mean, it's fascinating. He's a masterful teacher. It's captivating, and if you can find it, you might have to download it.
Okay.
But it's selling fast, and it's in one of the groups that I'm in. It's a book club book, and I got it, and I'm like, wow, this is a great book.
Nice.
It's a music paradigm. It's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
The music paradigm, looking
Okay.
at music, and I love music, so
Yeah.
to see it as a force for good, and it's nice to hear. So.
Yeah, very cool. I'll have to check that book out.
Yeah.
All right. Who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
Well, he's going to be embarrassed, but I'm going to say David Bauermeister
Okay.
of the Northwest Agriculture Business Center.
Yeah.
And I think he is retiring this year, and he's just been a fantastic leader in the agricultural world in the Northwest, and he's the one who had the vision for the Cider Association and many, many other programs. So he's the guy who's making things happen and really influenced me a lot.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. This is a fill-in-the-blank question. It's, I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
Hold an Oscar for Best Screenplay, Best Original Screenplay. So,
Awesome. All right. And you still have plenty of time for that. So
It's my third act.
there we go.
Yeah.
All right. Who is an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
Oh boy. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, have you interviewed the cider maker on the island?
Corey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you have. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I would like to find somebody else who's a maker or a grower, maybe a farmer.
Yeah.
If you haven't done all the farmers yet,
Yeah. I've done a couple of them.
or
but
the
yeah.
bee maker, honey.
Yes. Yeah. I had both Camano honey, and then I also did Cat's Paws, and it was so cool because they're so different in how philosophy of how they raise bees. But we sell both their honeys here, and they're both great honeys. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll be sure to reach out to get more ideas if you think of some.
Yeah, I think the artisans are really the ones who are the most creative and thinking in ways that we don't.
Yeah.
They just see the world differently.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, actually, someone from the Transformational Travel Council might be interesting.
Okay.
If you wanted to talk to someone from the Seattle, that would be interesting because they're looking at our two islands from a different, fresh set of eyes, and it might be interesting to see what Jake Halpert has to say.
Okay.
So I'm going to say Jake Halpert.
Okay. Very cool. All right. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
So many things. And one that's probably the most pragmatic is I would say put $100 away every month and start now.
Yeah.
Start at 20 because life flips by so quickly. The years go so much faster than you ever expect. And that nest egg will give you power. and give you freedom
Yeah.
and give you the ability to support programs and projects that you love and care about. So it's a good thing to do. Start early in life saving money
Yep.
so you're not totally dependent on the next thing.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been fun and I learned a lot more about, like, I've been hearing about the transformational travel, but I've learned a lot more about it now. So,
Great. Well, you're going to hear more too.
yes.
Thank you.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Sherrye Wyatt for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us be found by other Islanders like yourself. And for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. That's CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Well, a big thank you to Sherrye Wyatt for joining us on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to her podcast. I can't keep it going.